Okay, I think I did an optimization update originally, which was in black, and then the red was last update as of May 2013, and I apologize for penciling in July 2014, but I printed it and didn't have time didn't feel that
Header and footer.
the header and the footer, and I was coming over here, and I was like, darn, so when I got here, I started,
I like to see the paper
yeah.
used out.
So if we read the blue,
So the blue is what is actually updated as of now. So, May of 2013 to July of 2014 is what the blue is. So if you go through the optimization, the outsourcing laboratory services was completed. We roughly saved about $380,000 in the 12-13 year, and that's moved forward every year since then. Dual certification of plant operators. We were trying to get that completed by December of 2014. However, it won't be completed until October of 2015. We had retirements, so we were not, when the people retired, we weren't able to duly train 3 operators at any given time because you have to cover all the shifts at the plants. So we were only able to do 2 shifts last year instead of 3 shifts, and therefore it leaves 1 more person for next year. We had one of our water plant operators pass away this last year, so that person will not be filled, and that'll be a reduction for next year. And we have 2 people that either will, hopefully the older employees will retire. If not, there'll be layoffs at the wastewater plant to achieve those target goals of operations. Automation of the plants. As far as the water plant, the membrane replacement, we talked about this. Part of this project was bid, and City Council should see an award recommendation on August Council agenda. Draft engineering proposal has been prepared. The final engineering proposal should also be on the August agenda. As far as the wastewater plant, last year we reduced to not automate since we were moving, or we were going to do something with the wastewater plant in the future. And so we reduced that to just a monitoring and regulatory compliance type project. We have interviewed 1 vendor that has software, and there's, I think, at least 1 more, maybe another one that we would look that's relatively cost effective to implement that type of amount. I don't want to spend a whole lot of money, but there's some products out there that we can get what we need out of it, but on a relatively cheap basis. So, for instance, the wastewater plant, we're going to be monitoring pH, temperature, BOD, and which will help us if there's anybody dumping something of low pH. We'll be able to catch it versus right now, if you have an operator that's only going up and pulling a sample every hour, the minute he leaves, it could be an hour later before he finds something that comes in. So then we will monitor and tie into the aeration blowers, the dissolved oxygen in the aeration systems themselves, which could result in even more savings than that 25% that we're looking at, and then follow through with our clarifiers monitoring sludge blanket levels, and also what I want to do is analyze the different nitrogen levels of nitrite, nitrate through the whole system as we go all the way out through reuse. So hopefully in the next 6 to 8 months we'll have a vendor selected and stuff on the way, and monitoring probes get underway on it. Supervisory reclassifications are completed. Security system upgrades at both the water and the sewer plant are completed. The GIS system, last year we had 25 of the 82 Atlas sheets mapped out. This year we're at 68 of the 82 mapped out. So next year, and this sometime, early spring, we should have gone through most of them, but then we'll step back and pick up everything that we missed that we've been able to identify that wasn't picked up, and run back through it again. But it'll be much faster. You're not picking up all the data. You're just going out and picking up the stuff that was missed. The staffing as of this proposed budget is 54 employees, so we're right on level of what we were trying to accomplish. Next year, you'll have 51, so you'll see 3 reductions, one of which is the water plant operator that just passed on, and the other 2 are the wastewater plant operators once we get everybody cross-trained.
Tough way to reduce staff.
Yeah, so...
And the one position that'll be over the 50, is the one, is going to be the local.
Electrical.
The location.
Yeah, so if you look at that, actually this budget year, I'm at 53 of what our goal was. Our goal was 54 and we're at 53, but we added 1 back in, so I'm at 54. The other is the Clean Bee project that we just talked about. St. Lucie County bulk wholesale potable water. I haven't heard anything from them. I've tried every once in a while to contact them, but really never get any response from them. So for years they would contact us and have a conversation, have a meeting, and the next day there would be a newspaper article about it, and then 2 days later they would have finalized their agreement with Fort Pierce again. So I think they partially use us as a negotiating tool with their contracts with Fort
Oh,
Pierce.
they're going to do it.
So I don't know if that'll ever, but we're in a situation now where, the pipes are on the opposite sides of A1A, so you're only talking about a 50-foot installation of pipe to tie us into St. Lucie. And from an emergency standpoint, it makes sense to do that. We would receive water from Fort Pierce. So I'll try approaching them again and see what we can get. But
Yeah, from the emergency point of view,
even if we don't sell them anything, at least there's an interconnection at that point.
you have another interconnection someplace, don't you?
We have 5 interconnections with the county. So we interconnect in 5 different locations with the county water system. And then I don't know if they're interconnected with anybody.
Just out of curiosity, do you use them too often?
No. The only time we used them was when we gave them water in one of the hurricanes after. I think it was Wilma. We had to provide them with water. They had some power issues and VFD issues, and luckily they have elevated towers, so they have water, but they were running out. They couldn't get the water from the treatment plant into the storage tanks. So, but in the 14 years I've been here, it was used just once. So we created another one at the hospital, which is real good. So it's a real quick connection if there was ever an issue to get them water. So
You only need it once and it pays for itself.
yeah. So additional future reuse users, we talked about that, and one of the goals we'll do is try to address that, getting it more with residential customers, and we'll work through whatever issues we have to do with Dodgertown. The reuse for Johns Island, we've installed everything. It's still operating off of our old SCADA control system, and when we upgrade that in the future, then we'll upgrade that site also, and Johns Island's paying for all those increases. So what we had the parts and the pieces and all the other stuff that we needed from one of the exfil trenches, so we didn't charge for any of that stuff. They went ahead and paid for all the landscape upgrades and everything, and any of the electrical stuff that needs to be put in place, the impact fees, all that stuff is being paid for from Johns Island themselves. So, reduction in lab testing, that was completed. However, we're still working on reducing testing requirements. Through the operational permit that we just renewed, we were able to reduce some testing that we don't need to perform in the future. Also, we this week, I think it's Thursday, our consumptive use permit in Palatka is up for renewal, and we'll be reducing some of the water testing requirements from quarterly to semi-annually, and in some cases annually. So there'll be some additional savings on licensing and testing on that.
That change.
And you know, when you talk about most cities, your consumptive use permit and your operating permit, they have consultants do it. We do them internally, so they're very time consuming. That's what we did a lot of this year was those 2 permits. You're probably talking about a cost of, if you had a consultant do it, of $120,000 to $150,000. So those savings were realized by us. So readiness to serve charge, we've killed that project. I mean, and in some of these cases, what I was going to do is the next one that we come up with, things that are completed, let's just pull them out now that we're saying they're completed, and that's one of them. If you agree, we'll dial that one as completed and get that out of here. Billing by ERC usage, the city is currently billing all outside customers an ERC basis based on county rates. We're still utilizing our existing rate structure for the city residents. The next section down is things that were not part of the direct optimization items identified by GAI, but additional things that they were wanting to do. So we can go through those. The first one I know is we'll come back to, and that is the decommissioning and relocation of the wastewater treatment plant. But as far as water transmission and distribution system optimization, they wanted to look at the possibility of installing an energy recovery turbo unit and put it in when we fill our tanks. It'll spin just like running a pump backwards. So if you have a differential pressure between the 2 points, it'll spin a turbine and create electric current, so you can recover that. However, with this wet season that we've had in the last 2 years and water quality issues, we've stopped using those tanks. We've emptied them and mothballed them because we were having problems with keeping up with chlorine residuals and everything else. So at this time, I don't see the sense in spending any money on looking at that. Well pumping energy consumption. We're currently working with CDM Smith. I did some analysis myself with the numbers I put forward and how much we'll save. It costs a lot more to pump water out of the superficial aquifer than it does out of the Floridan when you look at kilowatts per million gallons pumped. So by us reducing the amount of superficial wells, we're going to save a certain amount of money. Now we're looking at our existing Floridan wells with when we come on with the plant expansions and trying to see what sequence of pumps is the most economical to run, and also if there's certain drawdowns in wells that we can go back in and rejuvenate those wells to lessen the drawdown, which lessens the kilowatts per hour to pump. So we're working on that with CDM Smith. Wastewater lift stations, they had another study on looking at different optimizations as far as reducing the pump sizes and reducing or increasing force mains. I've been doing that one for 14 years. That was one of the projects I first got assigned, and so we do it every time that we have every time we have a pump that comes up for failure, we look at it at that point and we analyze it. So to go spending money on that, I don't think that it's worth it. So aerobic digesters, again, that's the Clean B system. We'll save money on the digestive. We'll actually shut that whole digestive system down, which is where we'll have about a $90,000 or $100,000 a year power savings in that alone. Sludge management optimization, again, that's the Clean B system. We'll cover that. The whole rate, they had a wholesale rate study. At this time, if we're not doing anything with St. Lucie, I don't see the sense in having a wholesale rate for anybody if we don't have any customers. And then there's a level of service study, and that deals with impact fees and any of your little charges here and there we kind of went through that with the 09 rate study. We adjusted those little charges and fees and services. The impact fee, we don't have a whole lot of growth, so to spend a whole lot of money on a study that I don't see us really having a need to address that at any time in the near future. And even from a capacity standpoint, we know what our ultimate capacity is. We know we have a wastewater plant that'll meet that. We know we have a water plant that'll meet those ultimate capacities. So there's really not much that study would tell us. So Items without an update have not been addressed at this time, which is your wastewater treatment plant. We'll jump back to that, but there was some other additional optimization that wasn't addressed in GAI study. First one was debt restructuring that City recognized last year and that we were able to complete. So that is completed. Again, Cindy and I sat down and we talked about it, and we do have some potential savings for this upcoming year if council should decide to look at it. We would recommend going through the Finance Commission in the fall, but just rough numbers that I calculated, if we paid off 3 of the SRF smaller loans that we have, we'd save about $140,000 a year in operating costs. You would save over the life of those loans about $390,000 in interest costs.
What is the life of the loans?
They're probably still about 16 years, something like that. 2030. They go to 2030. So
What are we paying? What's the cost of the loan?
they're
you look-
cheap on interest.
If you look at page 140 of your operating budget, all of the debt service for water and sewers down there at the bottom, and you can see the ones that we're talking about. Down at the bottom under other expenses and non-departmental. And what we're talking about, what the ones we're suggesting is starting there with 310, 210 original, that 651, leaving that one alone and paying off those next 3, the 2 little ones that are at like 20 grand and 12 grand, and then amendment 2 to that series 310, 201, that's about 107 a year. So all 3 of those combined about $140,000
What's
a
the
year.
interest rate on those?
SRF, what loans? Wow, they're 2%.
2.8 on one, 2.26 on another, and I think 2.43 on another. So they're all.
So what you're saying is that you can't find a project that gets 3% or better alternative with that money?
In terms of earning money
You
on
can
it?
take that money and spend it someplace else and get 3% or better. That money's better spent somewhere else.
I mean, we've got all the projects that
We've got
create
everything
any
that we've
cost
created
savings
right now.
covered.
I mean, we'll
I mean-
continue to look at stuff, but
Well, that's the answer that I wanted to hear. I mean,
Yeah.
there isn't any, so that's the best use.
there's nothing sitting out there that I would say you're going to save 8 or 10% on if we do that project. I mean, because if you look at it, we really don't want to spend much at the wastewater plant because we're looking at a 7-10 year window of something. So it's kind of no man's land. I don't really go. I look at things that have a 2-year payoff and that we can move and reutilize when we do something. But other than that, I don't really want to make a large capital investment anywhere in there. So that leaves, the water plant, which we're doing something with, and with the reuse system, you're not going to improve sales or anything to recoup anything on that end. And we really don't have any. We don't have a huge cost of anything else that's out there in water distribution and stuff. We're replacing water lines at the airport now, and luckily it's one of those areas we're using our own staff to do it because we can. I don't like doing it in residential areas because I don't want to have to respond to an emergency and then leave a hole sitting there and people calling me. But in a place like the airport where you're just going out through the middle of a field somewhere, you can drop everything you're doing and leave. So and really in the airport, I don't get a lot of revenue from that area. They're not, besides Piper, there's really not a lot of high water users over there. So
The only other thing to consider is I wish I was earning better than that on cash and investments. Right now we're not, but we're talking about 20 years. I mean, could come to a point again where we did, but that's the only other thing is that.
yeah, and that was one of the things we looked at when we borrowed it. We discussed that at that point. Was everybody was thinking, wow, this is a short-term issue. Interest rates will be at 4%, and we're going to be borrowing at 2.4, and we'll be fine. And now they're still low. I mean, look, we refinanced last year at 1.67.
6.7.
I mean, that was incredible. That refinancing.
6.1, yeah.
So
In today's world, it's really high interest.
Let's move on to the.
and let's move on to the big discussion, and that leads to it. I mean, if you look at freeing up $140,000 a year in operating, then you could start earmarking some money here and there towards creating a fund to fund that.
We have two issues really to consider. First of all, what would we build, and secondly, how would we fund it? In both of those, we need a plan for it.
I think we have some preliminary plans.
Yeah, I've seen them.
We have some 2 or 3 different cost estimates with a couple different processes that you could look at. If it was, yeah, the capacity, you wouldn't have to have as high a capacity as what we have now. What I would look at, though, is whatever we build have the ability to remove nitrogen. Right now, I still think it's a benefit to send it out in the reuse system, because then people aren't fertilizing with, if we can get them to stop fertilizing if they're using reuse, that's a big plus, because they really don't
But they
need
still
it.
haven't gotten that message yet that the reuse water is very heavily with nitrogen,
Yeah.
and that's something we need to get out to all our reuse customers.
Yeah, and we sent it out in the last reuse thing that we did, and Judy had it in her document that was there. But yeah, we need to get that out. But at the same time, I hate to remove it. It costs you money, so I hate to.
Incur that cost,
to
yeah.
incur the cost of removing it just for have somebody to go spend money to go put it back in the ground. So that doesn't make sense either. So, but in the long term,
Rich water.
with this whole lagoon thing, I've seen crazy things happen over the years where a regulatory agency can come in and just block. I mean, just look at land application of biosolids. Is you can't put it anywhere on the ground from more or less Okeechobee, almost to the south end of Orlando, to the Florida Keys. And there's tons of ag users down there that could use it. So there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions to things, and I hate for something to come up in the future that you go and spend money on a wastewater plant, but you need to have the ability to install the equipment to get to that nitrogen side of things. Building the tankage would be very smart at that point. So we would want to look at something that was capable of installing a few pieces of equipment or valves or something so that you could go to nitrogen removal. But we can revisit that and look at if we do some of these refinancing things, we can do a projection of what we feel comfortable with, that, how much money we'll have. It does not make sense on the wastewater plant to do anything until that other bond issue goes away in 2021. At that point, you're going to drop from, currently we have 1.9 million down to like 600,000 if we refinance these other ones, or if we pay these other ones off. You'd be down to like $650,000 a year in debt service at that point, where you'd have the capability of bonding $20 million to do whatever improvements that you need.
I mean, what are we talking about?
Realistically, you're probably looking at a $20 to $25 million construction fee and $2.5 million in engineering. So on the high end, almost $28 million. So if you were able to save, $5 or $7 million over the next X amount of years, then you have that upfront money to get started, and then you could bond the rest and then take on the debt service of what we're paying now. So
You got a little gap in the pipe too, don't you, at the airport? The pipe that we put in.
everything's there. You would have just a little gap of getting the reuse water back to the main pipeline system. We stopped at the country club there, right at that little bridge that crosses over. So that's not that expensive to put that piece. We'll roll that into. And what you can do is restructure that tank that's there, that 3 million gallon tank, to being the high service pump, high service tank, and look at a few different.
High service for
I'm the ground storage.
the tank that's on
Yeah.
the site now.
So when do we decide to move out of the theoretical and into the
Yeah.
actual Ford plan? Like, how many years it's going to take? How much money? What we're talking about?
I would say let's take the opportunity over the next year to come up with the financial plan of it, with dates of when we would start things. Because you're still early. You're still not.
The 2021 is really the date.
Yeah,
That we
2021 is that
start
you would.
Start preparing.
Yeah.
You
We
could-
need to make the policy and then.
You could start engineering in 2020. You know what I'm saying?
Get a
And
high-level PERT chart out, this
exactly.
points.
You could engineer with cash and bond the actual.
That's what I'm saying. You could engineer with the cash and get all that started. That way, it saves you all that time And at that point too, you have a great opportunity to see SRF loans all over again with those low interest rates, because when they approved our original plan for wastewater, it included all that relocation stuff. So that's still sitting there, all approved, just ready for funding whenever we're ready to start the project.
Any concept on the decommissioning cost of the existing plant and clearing the site?
They did studies. I mean, there was a couple different ones, but one of the ones more intense was like $1 million or something like that by the time you beat it all up. Yeah. I did some tanks, and there used to be some old clarifiers and another tank there, and I decommissioned those, hauled all the stuff off for like $65,000. It was just concrete. You know, they were breaking it up and hauling it off type deal. So that's not
What
one
would
of the...
you leave there on that site?
You sailing?
How about the steel tank that's there?
The only thing that you would need would be we could either, right now our lift stations, you know, I've looked at the design to be able to pump all the way back, but if you wanted to have some type of a booster station that's right there, you could do something. If not, you have some lines that are running through there, like the 20-inch water main would still be running through that property. None of the other buildings are...
We could get away without any tankage at all, or
It'd be good
not
on
to
that side of the river. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Some type of an inline booster that would just be a above-ground piping pump
Yeah.
thing that we could sneak up close to the bridge and just have access to it or something like that.
I think building what Amelia said, a useful step would be in the next 6 months or something of that ilk, put together the beginning of some sort of a transfer or building a fund for it, which shows some amount of commitment. In other words, we have a transfer to fund number 371 or something like that.
Right.
And a timeline for it. In other words, a financial plan for it.
I mean, if you look at our budget and you look at that front page that you had, you roughly have, you know, at the end of the day, $1.2 million that's extra money, you know, this year. So I don't have it in front of me. Is that what the number is?
Yeah.
So if you looked at this year, and the other question you have is the step system. The step system we figured was about $1 million. So you could take this year's earmark $500,000, and we can come back with 2 capital sheets that says we're going to buy a couple pieces of equipment, and the other is the pipe, and we can get started on doing the step system. And then you could turn around and say, for next year, another $500,000 is earmarked and is, you know, going to go
that's
into
exactly what you need, something with
or
preliminary points,
or the other approach that you could do is take,
set them as a goal.
you know, right now in our operating fund we have 300 days of working or something. I don't know how much it is. So you could say we want 180 days as our goal of making sure we have operating funds in that. Anything above that goes into this fund for that, and then she can go back and forth depending on that 180 day mark, and this one can grow over here
You got to
and
set that as one of your goals for next year at this meeting, to have that chart set out for us, right down to build date.
Well,
Okay.
one of the things on the step system, now, we're going to have an awful lot of administrative stuff that you all got to pass ordinances to be able to implement this. The other thing is, we don't want to go and put a lot of infrastructure in the ground if
Yep.
we don't have
Yep.
customers. I mean, we got to have somebody
Well,
or some
let's-
mechanism to get people.
Let's talk about that. One of the things I think you have to do is you have to have a reasonable demonstration project. In other words, 8 houses, 10 houses, 20 houses, 15 houses, a street someplace, as the case may be. And you got to do that and learn from that. That's your first step, and that's where we need to get to one way or another.
And I agree with that, Dick. If we could do, now, we're going to have the small demonstration project, hopefully, which will be our restrooms. But if you can get neighborhoods to go on, the Shore Drive experience was people, I think a lot of those people would have bought into a $5,000 expenditure. They don't want that monthly sewer bill.
Yep.
And that's going to be a challenge.
Well, but at some point in time, we have the ability to say that we are going to do it.
Well, that's true, and require.
And in the interest of the lagoon, I'm not sure that's not the thing to do.
yeah. I'm not a policymaker, but my comment to somebody at one point was when they said, well, but then I have a $30 a month sewer bill, and I said, yeah, it doesn't cost you anything to pollute the
Let's think about it a
room.
different way. If you had 10 houses or 20 houses, we took your street just for the fun of it, any street. But if we took, no. Oh, okay, Live Oak. But yours is easier for me to think about. If we took your street just as an example, and let's say it costs $6,000 per house, and let's say for the demonstration project, how many houses are there, 12 or something? Let's say that we say, okay, we'll put $3,000 per house into the demonstration project and cut it in half, which pays for the sewer bill for a hell of a long time. You see what I mean? In other words,
Make an incentive.
why don't we think about it, whatever the demonstration project is, giving them some sort of an incentive. It's well worth it.
Get them to sign on.
Yeah.
You
They
could,
started to get a
Have
pilot
neighborhoods
project.
competing for it, so that would be.
Pilot project's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
you could look at areas where there's existing force mains right now with properties abutting them and then offer waiving impact fee. We're not going to call it a waiving of an impact fee. What you're going to have to do is it's just like going and buying the used car where this is what it costs, but you're going to get a discount of this that just may be the same as the impact fee, and at the end of the day, this is how much you owe.
I think you're going to, I think for the
And-
demonstration project, you probably have to do more than the impact fee. I think you have to have some sort of a, I mean, they're quite, whoever the homeowners are, I lived in Conway for a long time, but whoever the homeowners are, you're asking them to cooperate in this whole thing, but it's a good deal.
I think so.
So, and you waive the impact fee, and then you say, whatever.
We've been all talking about this for years and years. Next step is to actually get a plan, something with target points where this issue is going to happen here, this issue's here. And that's-
Yeah, originally what we
Looking for
looked
you
at
to-
was a sunsetting, what I was going to come back with you, to the council with was, a plan. It was going to be a 20-year plan of we install the lines and the
That's
people
exactly
connect
what
and
I-
everything else. And at the end of the 20 years, it's mandatory. But it's not mandatory for the first 20 years. In other words, as there was a failure, then it's mandatory.
You know how the hell old we are?
I'm looking at it from...
Look at it, Jay.
No, I'm looking at it from someone that's been out in the trenches and seeing the complaints and all the other stuff,
Yeah.
and kind of understanding the customers of what would be a reasonable buy-in to a program. Now, if you want to take that program and do an incentive on top of it,
I don't want to for the overall program, but I think you have two steps. You have what Craig's talking about, the long-range plan,
And the
but I
pilot
think you
first.
got to have a pilot. Because you're going to have to go back to the state and say, this is what, and you're going to have to learn the consequences. You're going to have to require that the septic tank be pumped every 5 years and on and on.
And convince people
Power use.
that it works and that they're not gonna
Right.
have any
Yeah, that's another set of the
problems.
programs, sales.
There are really two pieces of it, a pilot and
So,
a
You need a
plan.
plan. First thing you need is a plan, even if it goes out to a 15-year plan. Maybe we won't see it completed, but you need to start, today is where you need to start.
Let us do a white paper, we'll do a little financing plan, and then it'll be both the STEP and the wastewater relocation of the
Terrific.
wastewater treatment plant, because we have a 2021 date on that gives us,
Yeah, you
Do the
work your
step
plan
system
around that
first.
date. That's-
Yeah, but we'll do the
step system first.
Yeah. Yep.
Really have a target neighborhood picked out maybe even next year.
because I would think the STEP program is probably even more important than the relocation of the wastewater.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Wastewater treatment plant's not an environmental,
It's neutral, yeah. It's
aesthetic issue.
and like I said, right now, we can come back for the final budget with $500,000 set aside to fund this over,
Yeah,
with some other little things there
Put
so
some
that we
seed
can,
money in your fund.
we can put some seed money in it since we have the monies available, and then we'll, at the same time, be working on the
And you'll have
overall
an
scheme.
ordinance or resolution, not that a future city council can't overturn it, but you have a path forward. And once there's a path forward,
Get momentum.
You got a goal set out there for you.
And-
It's important.
And I'm meeting this week with Cheryl Dunn at the Health Department to work through some of the legal permitting side of how it's going to work. And then once I meet with her, I'll be meeting with DEP to discuss what they're going to want in the permit application. And I was going to submit a permit application in for the whole thing. If it's done through an individual permit, it won't be a whole lot of stuff that I need to put into it. It's a matter of the concept, and then a lot of it's handled as the as-built come back in through it. So at least, because what we got back from the governor, that was his aide or whoever it was reported to him, more or less said there is no issue now. So we'll see how it works. We'll test it by putting the permit application in. So,
Start somewhere.
yeah.
The other thing, the step system is far more important, but, one thing about moving the plant is, in the years ahead, we have an old plant, we'll have a much more efficient operation, we'll have it all in one place.
Oh, yeah, you'll be able to reduce
And
even more
we have
operators
all-
because they'll be on
all
one
the
site,
recreation uses for a
versus,
piece of land.
and you're,
Your legacy programs that we're all going to be responsible for starting now.
We'll
yeah.
call it the Craig Fletcher Sewer Plant.
Is that it?
We're adjourned.
Yeah, those
Yes,
were
that's
all
it.
for today. Then we
When
have
are you
tomorrow.
all going to come back with something, though, just so we know that you're coming back?
Well, in the budget, we'll put those couple items.
Yeah, we'll add.
We'll add enough money to the budget to, and we've got plenty of room to start the 500 grand or so we need across a few years for the step system, and maybe throw some money in for engineering and study on the relocation.
And then what I'll do is I'll meet with Cheryl and see what we're going to do and put something together with the city manager, and he can report kind of a date at the next, what's your next council meeting, next week? You can do under
So if
city
you came
manager's
back
matters
in
an update on it.
September as an example with a white
Yeah,
paper,
that'd be
Right.
great.
you see what I
Can you
mean?
do
Great.
something that quick? September?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
It might be a little sketchy, but
Make sure you give me.
It's okay.
it's like rough order of magnitude.
It might be opaque, it might not be white, exactly white, but.
We'll take a
Bunch from
stride.
me,
Okay, we're adjourned.
That-